So our first sparring game is against Leia. So Leia, you're playing D4. Why don't I go ahead with one of the India defenses? Actually, Leia, you were talking about, you researched these, right? Nimzo-Indian, Queen's Indian, right? Or anything else? I think you were looking at it from the black side, if I recall, yeah?
Yes, so I think playing from white will be helpful.
And I used to play the Nimzo-Indian. And I messed around with the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now I do some random like hippo stuff, like modern stuff more. Now, how about this move? What? You just move your pawns in the center. Is there a drawback to I mean, it looks like a gambit. Do you want to do this move, or is this the main move? Is usually C4. Because if I go knight C6, you might do this. What do you think about this move? Is it a mistake, or you want to do that?
That was a mistake. I think I've been playing as black for so long that
right. You got to get used to the format. Okay, so what's the main move that you would play?
Well, obviously C4.
Yeah, just the other one on the other side. And that's the thing about D4 openings with knight F6, any Indian defense. You're taking control of E4, right? Without actually playing D5 and occupying the center directly. So it's a little more indirect, like a hypermodern defense, right? But you're restraining white. So for example, okay, I'll delete that move. So you go for C4. So basically, you're saying, well, you want to try to play E4. First, I controlled my knight. You want to bring your knight out to C3, I'll pin the knight. So it's kind of like, it's more piece control over E4. Now, black can often, play D5 later. Black can play D5 whenever they want. Okay, so go for it. I did knight F6. You see it now in that position without E4. So we're just going to play, for anyone watching, we're just sparring with students in the class and just discussing the ideas openly, just casual sparring games. So we both discuss our ideas, come up with plans, look for tactical opportunities. So yeah, I'm going to go with E6. Now, E5 is the Budapest Gambit, which is kind of interesting. And if black knows what they're doing, they both play solidly. Pretty much white just has a little more center, but black's okay. But I think Nimzo is a good way to play. Very solid. And again, restricting. Just a restrictive way to play. So now you don't, now we're going into the Nimzo. And then if you play knight F3, that's where we're going into probably a Queen's Indian with B6. And again, black is playing for the E4 control, if nothing else. And just making it so it's going to be very hard for white to take over the center. Whereas if you're playing a King's Indian, like, well, go ahead, just take the center. They're not going to stop it. You can play D5, but if you play D6, they're just going to take the center if they want. Honestly, I don't like to take the whole center with white. There's an interesting version where the bishop comes out to G5 and then they play E3. So a little more modest. Because of course you're playing into black's hands by taking the whole center. Black will strike back on the dark squares. But yeah, that's the argument there. It's an argument. It's a debate around should white take the center or not. White plays classically, black plays hypermodern. Now with knight C3 again, white is ready to play E4 if they want. So in this case, black is not just letting it happen. Most likely, most cases they're going to go bishop B4 or just D5, transposing it to normal stuff. Normal Queen's Gambit decline. So let's go bishop B4. We'll play the Nimzo. It's a great opening to practice for both sides. So now you get to choose from various options. So Leia, have you looked into this and chosen something against the Nimzo? Really, any move is fine. I think A3 is a little slow, but I'm probably going to take on C3 anyway. But other than that, natural developing moves. What are some options? What have you chosen something already that you like?
I was leaning towards bishop D2.
That's a solid move. There are other options. It's not the most active, of course. It's more just direct response. Well, there are ways to try to not double your pawns if that's your concern, because of course it's annoying. And that would be black's arguments. I'm going to double your pawns.
That was my concern.
The bishop against your bishop pair. What's that?
That was my concern.
Yeah, then, well, if you don't want to double your pawns, there's different ways to handle it. Of course, what's another way to not double, right? In terms of being able to recapture and not doubling on the next move, what would be another way to do that besides bishop D2? That's one. So you have one candidate move there. What's another one?
I guess queen d2, although that seems kind of weird, but
Well, it'd be
I just
queen,
haven't seen
yeah.
it enough.
That'll be replacing the bishop move, but it could be a queen move. Well, queen c2 is popular. That's another way. It's a little slow though, again, just like with a3. Well, you're not wasting a move on a3. You're still developing your queen. But then again, your queen is gonna, that's gonna get attacked. So they're eventually gonna take most likely and go knight e4. I forget the exact line. I think it's like d5 or c5. There are various options, of course, for black, but eventually the knight will come in probably to e4. Often after taking on c3 queen, and then the knight will bother the queen. So yeah, it's a little slower, but it's possible. Bishop d2 is a little more passive, also possible. Then the other way to handle this is maybe e3, and then the knight can come to e2 sometimes. So if you really don't want to double your pawns, of course, black could take right away. They probably won't do it immediately. And then white can go knight to e2 and cover the knight to take back. So that's kind of like anti-Nimzo-Indian idea. Because the big idea is, again, double the pawns, get the knights against the bishops, try to outplay with the knights, close it up, but also the knight e4, covering the e4, controlling e4, get a grip on there, which will be combined often with bishop e7, even f5, like knight e4, f5, kind of a Dutch-like thing with the d4, f5, which is like a delayed Dutch. But either way, black wants to grab that e4 square and ideally occupy with the knight, maybe double the pawns, or even win c3. I mean, even win a pawn after it takes back. So basically getting the b pawn. Sometimes white allows that and gambits the pawn, castles. So yeah, that's another way to kind of, on the next move, to not allow that. Of course, it's a little awkward with the bishop, but it's playable. And then sometimes they'll just play like bishop d3, knight f3. So it's very popular as well. You can see with e3 opening book, it says normal line. I think it's Rubinstein. I don't really know that well. I think it's Rubinstein or something. Anyway, so you can go with the queen out. I think queen b3 is a little dubious, but there's a queen move to guard it. You have bishop d2, you have e3, you have, and of course, again, not e4 because knight would take due to the pin on the knight. You could bring your knight out. So those are your main options. Or you could go a3, but again, I'm happy with that. Because like you're spending a move on a3. I'm going to take c3 anyway, and then it's my move, and I'll have the lead in development. So what do you think? Just which option seems most feasible? I mean, I could pull out the opening book, but we're not going to use the opening book and the computer and just discuss ideas, I think, and just do what you would do. How you think about it.
If you're going to take it anyway, like, should you just develop?
Yeah, that's popular. I mean, e3 is very popular from what I think that might be the main option. Knight f3, queen c2 is pretty popular. I don't think a3 is popular. I think I've seen Bronstein or Spassky, I think, do that. So what do you favor there? And if you do bring a queen out, really it's queen c2 because you don't want your queen to kind of get too vulnerable out there. Just going with what you wanted to do. That's fine. Again, it's quiet. It's just a quiet line, but it's solid. Can't go wrong with it, really. So now I'm thinking my first inclination is to play c5 and just strike. Again, I don't know all the lines here, but common sense. Since you blocked your queen, I could put immediate pressure on your d pawn. That's one idea. But then I imagine you're going to go a3. So that gets interesting. Now g5 is very natural. So it becomes like a Rogozin defense with a natural queen's gambit decline with the insertion of bishop b4. But then you play bishop d2. So the argument there would be, okay, it's a less aggressive version for you. So I'm comfortable with that. Castles is a move, but you are going to play a3 if you want. So I have to reckon with that. So c5, I'm looking at c5. So if I go c5, you can go e3, but the most critical line is a3. Now, if I could take, but I can also go, yeah, I think I like taking a 90, I can go 94 then after that. But let's see, c5, a3. There's also takes on d4. You take my bishop, I take you. I think that's okay for you though. Your bishop gets on a nice post. Probably happy with your bishop on c3 with the pawn not in the way. Nice diagonal pressure. With the bishop pair, uncontested bishop, I don't have the b4 bishop. So I don't think I like that version. But if I go c5, you go a3, I take, you take. Maybe I stick the knight on. rather on e4. That's possible. Looks a little like liquidation type of stuff. So I think the more aggressive lines are simply castling or d5. So I'm inclined to just castle, and I don't have to worry about your bishop pin right now, really. I doubt you'll move your bishop twice, at least too slow. So I'm weighing those two out. So it's just really castles, a3, I'd say bishop takes, maybe then knight e4. That looks playable to me. And I definitely want, the thing about the Nimzo-Indian is black gets really quick development. You know, just no wasted time. Knight out, bishop out, castles. A little bit of central control over d5 and e4, fighting for e4. So, and if white ever plays d5, that will come under attack because of black's pressure there. So now what? Or just tell me kind of how you could just kind of think out loud if you want in terms of how are you approaching this? How do you deal with the bishop? Do you need to? How do you finish your development in a comfortable way that meets the needs of this position? But if nothing else, white has this small space advantage with the pawns out there, can comfortably develop, of course. And that's what you were saying, Nikki, right? Just pretty much get the knight out, get the bishop out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking knight f3 to facilitate development and to also exert control over the king side.
Yeah, natural move. It's like it has to be played pretty much. And now e3 knight g2 is kind of rendered moot because you're already guarding c3. Again, the idea for you is I'm not going to give black what they want, right? With the doubled pawns, I don't want to deal with that. And it's often a compromise. Say I'm going to get rapid development and the bishop pair, and I'm going to probably play e4 maybe in replay, you know, as a sort of compensation or a trade-off for the doubled pawns. So yeah, knight f3, can't go wrong with that. And you just don't need e3 knight g2, and it would block your bishop. There's the drawbacks. Yeah, knight f3 looks like probably the best move. Knight f3 or e3. I can also imagine a fianchetto. Probably that's playable as well on g2. That's another thing. But yeah, I can't go wrong with that. Now I might actually fianchetto, thinking of that, because again, it's consistent with my strategy of light square control. Really started with e6. Because if you think about e6, knight f6, well, knight f6 first, they're both fighting for some light squares. Bishop b4, putting pressure on the knight, or pinning the knight at first, takes away a defender, but gets ready to take away the defender. So it's really about that light square control, and then maybe c5/d5, and can really attack the center anytime I want. I do like this option. So it's kind of more like a Queen's Indian combo. With the bishop and Queen's, we've talked about this before, right? King's Indian, king side fianchetto, Queen's Indian, queen side fianchetto. Out of, you know, with e6 against, with e6, knight f6 stuff like this. But we just have the insertion of bishop b4 now. I'll promote that line. No, sorry, I'm right here. So you went for, yeah, you can't go wrong with this. So it's kind of like a Catalan for you now. I was actually showing my student this yesterday. He's like, I like the Catalan. It's a great opening. Very solid. Bishop should be strong, of course. And you're contesting my bishop, which is actually the typical response to a Queen's Indian. So we just have this weird Queen's Indian hybrid with the insertion of bishop d2. I think it's playable if it's fine for both sides. Probably white has a slightly comfortable position, but of course black is striking back on the light squares. Now I have to make a decision in the center eventually. Do I strike with c5/d5, or do I play something like d6? And now again, it's not ideal that my bishop would have to maybe give itself up without doubling pawns, but again, that does fit in with the knight e4 idea, as opposed to simply playing like d5, and if you play a3, just retreating. That's playable too, I think, but it's more passive. So I do think this is interesting, just taking and playing knight to e4 or d6 first. Yeah, d6, kind of wait to see what you do. Wait to see what you're going to do about my bishop. I don't have to worry about checks anymore. The king's castled, no tricks on the bishop. And yeah, I kind of want to do this anyhow. Maybe I end up playing c5 or e5 to put pressure on the dark squares, especially if my bishop's absent. I could challenge dark squares. That's what Fischer did against Spassky in round 5 in 72 match. Although he did double Spassky's pawn, so a little different. But this is common. And again, I wait for you. Maybe you play a3 first, and then I take. Let's see what you do. Rather than commit immediately. So flexible. Now you just have to make a decision about the trajectory of the game. Although you've kind of already made that decision with the bishop g2 and bishop d2. Pretty much your setup has been established. And it's kind of, do you go a3? Do you castle? Well, yeah, and then it's just a matter, okay, what's your plan from there? Do you play for a break? Do you build? Where's your queen and rooks go? Where do they go? So what do you think at this point, Leia? What kind of, well, you do have certainly a natural move on the next move, which you know you're going to do at some point. But beyond that, your piece placement, right? And do you play a3 or not?
I was thinking about a3, but at the same time, I'm also trying to figure out what to do in the event of if black takes knight e4. I'm not entirely sure what to do about that.
Right, that's probably what I want. Takes knight e4, and if nothing else, I can get your bishop back. So, but that's what I was looking at earlier. I was like, well, the c5 line, I was thinking the liquidation would almost certainly happen. And if I'm playing aggressively for maybe a win, why would I want to liquidate right away? I liquidate, white still has a slight space advantage, which is fine because it makes sense to trade if your opponent has space, but then it's kind of more drawish, like you're not fighting for as much. So you keep the pieces on the board for a bit, makes sense, pretty standard. But yeah, a3 is certainly playable, but you can also just keep developing. And my idea is, though, I'm just going to keep my bishop there for as long as I can. Maybe I end up playing c5 and or a5, not both, it'll weaken b5, but one or the other, and just leave the bishop there and take when I need to. But leave the tension, so you put the onus on your opponent, right? They have to make a choice. Make a decision. Okay, just deal with it. Say, okay, this is going to happen. Now, if you have a choice between bishop takes and pawn takes, what's consistent here? Natural
I was
fall.
thinking bishop takes, so to
Right.
not double the pawns.
Which was your original idea, of course. So it would be very inconsistent to play b takes, as that would just be, I think that would be pretty bad, because like, well, you played a3, you played pawn. That's what would happen if, you know, without bishop d2. But since you played it, yeah, you take with the bishop, you have flexible position, bishop here. Now, again, I could try to take it back, but you would still be able to, you know, defend that and not double your pawns. And again, a little more drawish once the pieces start coming off, but you're certainly fine. And you have the slight space advantage, you know, conferred by you.
I find that sometimes this like 3-pawn formation can kind of work if they like act as a tank, but I feel that given the position as it is, that wouldn't be helpful.
Which formation? Oh, you mean if you take on b takes?
Like the doubled pawn and then the one on to the side. Like,
yeah,
it can work sometimes, but I feel like that wouldn't be great in the position as it is at the moment.
Right, and that's not really what you're playing for. And that's what I want. You know, that is what I want. Then I would target your c pawn, knight c6 to a5. Well, then I might go bishop a6 later. Well, that would be different, but still, it'd be a little more rigid. And it's like, well, was bishop d2 actually a move you probably would want something else like bishop g5 or something in those scenarios. It's a bit of a hybrid though with bishop g2. It's a different, yeah, it's really a Queen's Indian hybrid, so it has its own flavor here. But yeah, certainly bishop takes is the move here. You can always play like b4. Yeah, my coach Jacobian in high school, he would love to do, well, he would do that with queen c2. So let's say he would go queen c2, queen would take on c3, b4, bishop b2. So just comfortable queenside expansion. Maybe play for like, he would do like b4, c5 stuff, things like that. So pretty just positional play, long-term pressure kind of thing, bishop pair. But again, given that, well, your bishop's on c3, I can always go knight e4 and take it. Although maybe I won't, because it really, again, it's not consistent. What I want is to occupy e4 for as long as I can. And I probably will play f5. We'll see. Like a sort of Dutch like side or reverse bird, which I will do, you know, f4, bishop b4, knight e5, which is very aggressive. So you just do that with the tempo down. Now my 2 candidate moves are pretty much 3 candidate moves really, but knight bd7 is very natural. Knight e4, just that's the thing. If I don't go knight e4, I kind of lose my chance to, because then you can play b4 and tuck your bishop back. So I mean, I probably will just insert it. Don't have to worry about the pin because I take on c3, hitting the queen there with tempo. So knight bd7 should be the move. c5 is a move too, but helps open your bishop. So I think, oh, sorry, I mean knight e4, knight e4. And then the knight can follow through, and maybe I play f5 to anchor in the knight and be able to attack maybe with g5, g4, maybe queen f6 or rook lift. So why not? And maybe e5 or yeah, e5, c5, lots of ideas. But I don't like d5. I already played d6 because it gives you the e5 square. I want to restrain. Again, that's the idea of the Nimzo-Indian, restraint, a big part of it. e4 control, restraint, double the c pawns, main ideas, and rapid development. And eventually you strike back at white center. Then there is the immediate, just to show, there is the immediate d5, c5 play as well, if black wants. So lots of, it's a very rich opening, lots of ideas for both sides. Now what? I want to take, I might want to take c3. I'm not totally, convinced that I want to take c3, but it's always in the air because again, it would double the pawns, give me something to work with. We want imbalances. So far, we have the slight space advantage for white and the 2 bishops versus knight. So we have that. Those are the main imbalances, and you haven't castled yet. Not a huge deal though. Obviously, you can castle whenever you want. I don't have an immediate attack. But yeah, so it's pretty much, do you want to let me double your pawns or not, right? Bishop b4 is nothing because I could just attack it with the a or c pawn. So it might be a candidate move for a sec, and you're like, nah, I kind of want c5 anyway, or even a5, a4 to get a grip, right? So for instance, I'll just put it as this, well, just bishop b4, a5, bishop returns. I can still double your pawns, even bishop d2. I just ignore it, take when I feel like it maybe, and go a4, grip on b3, right? Knight might come in later. Just uncomfortable for white structure, to cripple the structure, gain space on the queen side. So Leah, what are you leaning toward here? What are your, well, we want to break it down. You understand the position and understand it in general context, but understand it more so by weighing out 2 options at least, and reveal some nuggets of truth about the position, right? So what are your, let's say, 2 candidate moves at this point?
One is to castle,
Mhm.
and the other is queen c1, although
Mhm.
it seems it's one of those things that seems theoretically good, but I'm not entirely sure about moving the queen at this juncture. But
Mhm.
it seems like if you are going to take c3, then it seems like that would be the way to not double the pawns.
Well, it could be like queen anywhere, really. If you're going to move the queen, it's
Sure.
really, it's like 3 moves, I don't know about b3. I think queen b3 is just kind of dubious in general. It stops your b4 idea. It's just not useful, really, in these positions. And again, you might get hit with a5, a4. So really, it's queen c1, as you said, or queen c2. Queen d3 also, it's kind of like your queen's sort of not necessary on queen to go to, it's just not necessary to go to d3. And she could become, who knows, later on, maybe some trades happen, knight c5, maybe the knight moves, bishop e4, maybe e5, e4. So the queen just gets kind of vulnerable on d3. Maybe she gets attacked by a rook, queen e7, rook a8. So really, you see d3, and just useful to know, d3 and b3 in these positions are really kind of like, you might say, unsophisticated in a way. Because like when you know the opening, you just kind of don't do it, right? Those in the know, right? They go queen c2 really, or maybe queen c1, as you said. But yeah, not queen b3 or d3, just a note. So yeah, I think queen c1's fine, but I would weigh it against queen c2 really, or rook c1. So those are the moves. Again, those are your only moves other than bishop d2, which doesn't seem necessary because I could take it anyway. So it's maybe there, but really queen c2, queen c1, rook c1, or just castle. But again, it's sticking with this theme of not really letting me double your pawns, because it's kind of like you don't really want to give up on that. That was your idea originally. So that's kind of the way you're playing this. It seems to me. It just wouldn't be consistent to let me double your pawns. It's just not necessary. Yeah, so queen c2 probably superior to queen c1 when you weigh it out. It's like, oh, well, queen c1's fine, but it blocks your rook. It's less active, right? There you go. Okay. So knight, now my candidate moves are knight d7 or f5. Given that I don't, well, actually I have to be a little careful. You have knight, now you have knight d2 actually. Because I can't take, there's no tempo on the queen. So I actually have to be a little careful there. So for example, I go f5, you go knight d2. I don't really want to play d5 and make a stonewall type setup. That's interesting, actually. Very annoying. So you see the strength of this move. Well, I might just have to take. I might need to go ahead and take it soon. Yeah. Maybe, and I have to really reckon with that, because knight d2 is something you need to consider. Because it's I don't want to take that. I don't think so. The bishop will take b7 to get my rook. No thanks. G5 is kind of, yeah, d5 is against what I'm doing. And then f5 again, knight d2. I think I might lose a pawn. I'd have because I don't want to take a b7, so I have to play d5, which is just not really what I'm aiming for. It's playable. It's if I'm really going to stick with my idea of leaving my knight on e4. If I'm really stubborn about it, I can go f5, and that's if you go knight d2. Then I could go d. It's playable. I have to reckon with that. But knight d7, no, because knight d2 works. Otherwise, I'm not going back. That's pointless. I would take on c3, which is fine, and then the other knight starts coming out, and then yeah, other things become possible like f5. So I may just need to suck it up and take c3. Not terrible. Yes, I certainly wouldn't disregard this. So f5, knight d2, d5. I don't care if you take, I just take back with the f pawn. It's not terrible, but it weakens the e5 square. Keep that in mind. But you only have one knight. Just cover. I think that's the most adventurous way to play this. I just think it's very dry if I take on c3. Okay, we'll be adventurous. A little dubious, probably. Probably knight takes is correct, but let's just try this. And then that's if you go knight d2, then I have f5. Not terrible. It's like a modified stone, because in a stone wall, you'd have this position with c6. So the bishop might be okay, actually. It might get to open later. We'll see. That's if you go knight d2. Of course, that's one reasonable candidate move. So what are your candidate moves now?
I'm thinking knight d2.
I pretty much have committed to d5 at this point after knight d2, right? Because I just can't take something. I'd be giving up material. You take b7. Yeah, so you go knight d2. My response in that calculation tree, considering d5, then what? I mean, it's not like it's still somewhat aggressive for me, having the pawns here, but it's just, blocks my bishop and so forth, gives you e5. So it's a solid way to play, or you could just ignore it and keep developing, right? There's two options. How would you keep developing if you don't do that?
Castle or yeah.
Castle is maybe a rook move, but if you're considering a rook move, it's not. Yeah, it's not really clear that it would help you so much at the moment. Of course, you want to bring your rooks out at some point. Castles is pretty much necessary, so why not? And then it's okay. I still have a moment to deal with this, so. But maybe now I get knight d7 in. I still have the d5 option, but then I'd probably prefer going. I think I could then go knight f6, because then I would have 1, 2, 3 defenders on the knight. You would have 1, 2, 3 attackers. So I may as well just get this in now. So if you do, again, always preparing, knowing it's very important, knowing that your opponent has this option, right? Being ready to respond. I'd rather keep I could have taken it on that, but I'd really want that knight on e4. It's a strong square for it. Maybe I provoke f3 later. Still weakens your position a little bit. Maybe I play e5 open. Sure, I played f5, but you would also be moving your f pawn and kind of tit for tat there. Then I can play e5 soon as well to open up the file, maybe attack your e pawn, e3 square, things like that. And the more you play these things, it's just you see GMs do it, you play it. Like I'm mentioning these ideas, but it's not that I'm seeing ahead that deeply. It's just I know these possibilities largely because they're thematic, right? So don't think, oh, how does he see it? Yeah, it's just thematic. E5, f5, e5, provoking f3, things like that. Also, if you provoke f3, it weakens g3, right? A lot of times the bishop's on d6, stacks and stuff like I've had some bad scenarios where I played f3 in a Catalan against a stone wall. There's a bishop on d6, then they sack on g3 and it gets dangerous in most cases. But here it's less dangerous for you because I don't have more pressure on g3. So anyway, just things to think about. But yeah, it's really just what you want to know, the possibilities inherent in this position. So it's not even the moves, it's just what's possible for black, what's possible for white. Then we'll look at the moves, how they clash.
My question for positions like this is that when should you try to break through with your pawns?
For you or for me?
I mean, in a general sense, like it seems that often when I'm analyzing a game with the computer, it's telling me I should have broken through with the pawns a lot earlier than I actually did, and I'm never clear as to when you're doing it at the right time, or it's too premature, or it's too late and you've caged yourself.
Yeah, it feels like black would be the one more likely to make breaks. Well, if you make a break, it's committal. You'd do it really once you'd want to be prepared with the pieces behind, generally speaking. So for example, I have 2 breaks. This is the most likely, e5, maybe I mentioned c5, puts pressure on d4. But let's say if I go here, I'd probably want my queen off the file. Sometimes they even go queen e8, this types of Dutch positions. Maybe queen goes to h5, looks pretty aggressive, right? g5, g4, try to mate with the rook coming, right? Now that in that case, I might not even need the break because, well, the thing is, so let's say I go for a king side attack. That would give you all the more reason to want a central break to distract me because, as they say, the best response to an attack on the flank is a counter strike in the center, counter attack in the center, right? So you might do it if I go there. Also, I might go queen e7, rook a, d8 or e8, and then go e5, which is pretty solid there. Now you might go for b4, c5, but really, you want to have your pawns in the right place. And then you break when you feel like your pieces are supporting it. You're behind the pawn, sort of prepare, supporting your break. And of course, it comes down to concrete calculations, right? You can't just do it because it's generally good. Yeah, as you said, the timing. Well, you'd have to look at the tactical possibilities, of course. Like again, if I do it now, it just doesn't work. I think based on the fact you have 1, 2, 3 on it, I only have 2 guarding it. And you might have like rook a d8, rook a d1. I mean, putting pressure on the d file. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? Oh, you're muted.
Morning, David.
Good morning.
Yeah, ran a little late today.
No, it's all good. We're just in the middle of the game. We're just actually, this is a transitional phase. We are just getting out of the opening pretty much because, just connecting your rooks, both castled, pretty much getting we got all our minor pieces out. So we're in the middle game now. And now it's planning, I'm obviously playing for the E4 square. It's kind of started as a Nimzo-Indian, but combined with the Queen's Indian features, the bishop on B7, but the bishop on B4 helps to control E4, right? Got rid of the knight on C3. So I'll show you a few moves back. See. So we took the knight on C3. And are you familiar, Andrew, with the Nimzo-Indian?
I've heard of it.
But you don't play it.
No, I haven't learned it yet.
So yeah, we have so you see black is really gripping those light squares. That's my goal. You could challenge it at some point. We talked about that. And Leia, actually, I didn't mention, but you naturally, when you play D4, you are fighting for more dark squares. I know I mentioned knight E5 and so on. So by playing D6, I'm compact, very compact structure working against that. So they call it it's kind of like a hedgehog type setup when you have the 2 pawns. Got my quills in there, whereas you would have more of a Hummer. I'd have more like a beetle or something, and you'd have a Hummer, or I'd have a smaller house and you'd have a larger house or smaller fortress. I call it the house when you go E3, E3, B3, you kind of have the roof or house setup. So that could become like that. And then, I would have the kind of more of a smaller house, or smaller territory, but I can monitor it more closely. That's why I get a little nervous if you have a big yard, right? Got to watch out for invaders on all sides, right? Or
Guard dogs.
What's that?
Guard dogs.
Well, that's why you need guard dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, good point. Yeah. Or I'm sure people with their decked out security systems.
Yeah.
With their big properties and their private in their gated communities.
Yeah.
I would be a little more comfortable with row house kind of thing, get more people around you, nice and more community, I guess.
Cozier.
I need to go
That's
now.
beyond the point, but yeah, compact. What's that, Leia?
I need to go now, so.
Oh, you got to run. Okay, yeah,
I
right
hope
at
we
1.
can finish
Okay,
it later,
but I think
though.
this is good. Yeah, I think this is great. We got out of the opening. We see the main ideas, and and I have this saved in our study. And I guess I'll go game 2 and I'll add someone else. So awesome work, Leia. But you figured out, we looked at some options, and I think you made great choices. So cool. I'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Yeah, I think she did great, So I'm just talking about some of the ideas that black can pursue. And really, the other main idea for black would be the early strikes with D5, C5. So I chose the more compact. I chose the beetle setup, right? So yeah, and she has more space, but she's solid. Like the fianchetto is very solid. She did allow me to double, so she's also solid, but again, a little more space. So probably white has a slight edge. I'll click. Yeah, let's see real quick, just out of interest, what the computer says. Computer says white has 0.1, 0.3, whatever. So literally a very,
91.
very, very, very slight edge.
What? I was
Just
not
gonna-
thinking 91.
What's that?
I was not thinking 91 for her, but that's a really good move.
Oh, I'm talking about the knight maneuvers. Yeah, like maybe knight d2. I don't know if it looked at knight d2 since we're already pretty much done with it. A 91, and then the knight d2 idea. I mean, that's like basically even. But see, it's figuring, it's kind of shuffling.
Oh
It's
yeah, I was thinking some kind of rook move of some sort. I didn't know where.
Yeah, that's kind of a not such an intuitive rook move. It's kind of awesome, but now it likes her a little more. But I mentioned the knight d2 idea. It says it's even. Oh, because you can take on c3. Anyway, it gets messy. You can take c3 too. A lot of tactics there. Then the other thing, but just to show you back here, I mean, normally I wouldn't look at it during the game, but since it's just
right.
Sparring game for the class. So right here, I chose to play on 94. So if I go, right here, I mentioned, her choice to maybe go knight d2. Right, that was her best move, actually. Because I would literally have to go d5, which I did not want to do, but I figured I wanted to spice it up a little bit. But so
Mhm.
my best move is probably knight bd7. Oh, it says queen c8 to guard. Probably knight bd7 is playable. I don't think. Oh, funny enough, this has been played once and it was a draw after knight takes e. Like I said it was drawish, right? It became a draw.
Yeah.
Among some 24, 2300. Anyway, and the other thing was, so yeah, she could have played immediately after she gets the pressure here. I want to grip the knight there, grip that square. She goes here, d5, and it's not ideal for black, really. White has, some more solid position. We have e5. It's kind of a strange version of a Dutch. Because usually, again, you would have stonewall with c6, b7, more solid. Anyway, it's playable, but not ideal for me. Okay, so anyway, that was Leia's game. So maybe I could stop the video, I guess, and start a new one, or we could just keep going. What do you guys think? Should I just stop it for this game? Just so we have the Nimzo and then we can have it
Yeah,
counted.
I think that would
Okay.
probably be a good idea.
Great. So I'll
Yeah,
stop.
sounds
this one.
good.
Really interesting game. Okay. And then we'll have another one. I'll connect to it. All right. We'll go ahead and stop recording.